We'll get to Carnival in a second. This is really important, and I will say in generalities that people, particularly with TMBS, but obviously also this show, we're part of the context of helping make this letter happen, is how I'll put it. And about 30 members of Congress, spearheaded by Congresswoman Susan Wild, who's a really good labor-oriented congresswoman out of Pennsylvania, and also co-led by Ro Khanna. And maybe let's just run down some of the other names on the list. Of course, Ilhan Omar is there, Jamie Raskin, Bobby Rush, Adriano Espaillat. Ro Khanna was the other lead on it, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Deb Haaland, Jose Serrano, Frank Pallone Jr., but also Charlie Crist, as an example, Mark Pocan, James McGovern, Alan Lowenthal, and others. So these are people you should look at the letter and make sure that you thank them. And they have signed a letter written to Mike Pompeo. And again, this is the type of thing that will register in Brazil. It's going to make no difference, obviously, to current U.S. policy, but this is a big deal in Brazil. And I'll read just briefly, I'll read the first two graphs, and then it goes into detail on the abuse of the LGBTQ community under Bolsonaro, the assault on indigenous people, as well as the assault on labor and pensions. Dear Secretary Pompeo, we're writing to urge you to publicly emphasize the importance of defending the human rights of the people of Brazil. Since the election of far-right candidate Jair Bolsonaro as president, we have been particularly alarmed by Bolsonaro's threat poses to the LGBTQ community and other minority communities, women, labor activists, and other political dissidents in Brazil. We are deeply concerned that by targeting hard-won political and social rights, Bolsonaro is endangering Brazil's long-term democratic future. As a still developing democracy, Brazil must be particularly vigilant in protecting its institutions and ensuring the separations of power in the country. Even before Bolsonaro took office, the regressive trends pushing against Brazil's democracy were clear. It should concern all who are committed to Brazilian democracy that Bolsonaro was elected after former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, widely acknowledged as the most popular leader in Brazil, as the most popular political leader in Brazil, was barred from running in controversial circumstances that put to risk the right of the people of Brazil to freely choose their president. Of course, the next letter must be stronger. Zero evidence, and he is in fact the world's most prominent political prisoner. And there's some new stories about that case. Again, zero material evidence. He's literally jailed for indeterminate acts. The second sentence he was just hit with a forensic analysis showed that the judge copied and pasted part of the first sentence into the second sentence. And there's another story that might be coming out, I can't comment on yet, that will blow a whole other hole into Judge Sergio Moro's case. Carnival is a site of resistance in the Caribbean, and it was no different at this year's Brazilian Carnival, which is part of the freakout of the bizarre Brazilian president. This is a report from Michael Fox for the World News Network about resistance and Lula Livre at Brazil Carnival.
Brazilians are in the streets for Carnival, millions across the country. And for many of them, it's an act of resistance. Supporters of former President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva have formed free Lula Samba groups around the country, like this one in Florianopolis. They've been practicing for several weeks. They took to city streets over the weekend.
We are here today with everyone who wants to combat fascism in Brazil. This is a political act to combat Lula's unjust imprisonment and transforming Carnival into a big grassroots action against this.
Former President Lula has been in prison since last April. He was convicted of accepting a beachside apartment from a company seeking government contracts. But the ruling was based on plea bargain testimony. No evidence was ever found. His jailer, Judge Sergio Moro, is now President Jair Bolsonaro's justice minister. Lula supporters say his imprisonment was just a move to block him from running in last year's elections.
Today, the greatest grassroots leader that we've ever had is unjustly imprisoned, accused of crimes that he didn't commit and for which there is no proof. And we need to agitate so we can get him out of prison, so he can be free.
They've also removed protection for the Amazon and indigenous people, which is an almost genocidal threat to those communities in Brazil and a threat to the entire global ecosystem, although leaders in Bolsonaro's new government have called things like global warming a cultural and Marxist plot. They also have an advisor who's a Brazilian who lives in the state of Virginia, who's a fascist that does astrology consults, who recently was actually asking on social media for money to help get health coverage. The ironies and disgustingness of these people abound. Lula lifted Bolsonaro. Lula lifted 40 million people out of poverty, and he and the Workers' Party helped transition Brazil out of a military dictatorship in the 1980s. So thank all of the Congress people, particularly Congresswoman Susan Wild and Ro Khanna, but also AOC, Jamie Raskin, Jim McGovern, Adriano Espaillat, Bobby Rush. I'll be tweeting this out again. And Premila Jaipal, Jesus, Chuy Garcia, Peter Welch, and Jane Schakowsky, Rosa DeLauro, and several others. They need to be thanked, and they should be pushed to do further letters, maybe even a resolution in the House condemning the political imprisonment of Lula and the cancellation of democracy and rise of fascism in Brazil. And also, if your congressman didn't sign it, your congressperson didn't sign it, call them and ask them why not. All right.